What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. We continue with our 2025 college football predictions for the upcoming 2025 college football season. Up next is the Syracuse Orange. Obviously, Syracuse, a team last year coming off a very surprising season in 2024. They're coming off a 10-win season, 10-3 year for Syracuse in 2024. They were not really talked about very much, being in that playoff conversation, but they were mostly in the top 25. Pretty much everybody started talking about them not until the second half of the season. But yeah, this Syracuse team came out of nowhere and had a 10-win season in 2024. My thoughts on this team before we get into the official predictions for 2025. I look at this Syracuse team offensively. That's probably the most concern that I have for this Syracuse team. I think the defense actually will be just pretty average. I think it will be an average type defense, but you look at this offense, quarterback position, definitely a big concern in my opinion. There's just not a ton of depth on the offensive side of the football overall, especially at the wide receiver and offensive line position, but the quarterback position definitely is a concern. Kyle McCord is gone, so that's definitely a huge loss for the Syracuse team, because if you go back to last year, the passing game for Syracuse was really off the charts, and they were actually probably one of the top passing attack teams in the country. So yeah, definitely a lot of concerns here for Syracuse, and I think that's why they could take a big step back this year in 2025. Not saying they're going to be a bad team, but the schedule also has something to do with it, and here's that schedule for 2025. Again, Syracuse, they were 10-3 last year in 2024, so let's go game by game, and I'll give you my official prediction for this Syracuse team for 2025. And again, like I said, a very tough schedule this year coming up for Syracuse. They will open things up here in Atlanta on a neutral field against Tennessee on August the 30th. Pretty tough matchup for Syracuse to start out the year, but I think Syracuse actually might be a little bit competitive in this game. I look at this Tennessee team. Obviously, they do have a transfer quarterback as well, and they're kind of going through that phase with new faces on both sides of the football, but I look at Tennessee's secondary. That kind of is a big advantage here for the Vols, and I just think Tennessee is a little bit too more firepower than Syracuse on the offensive side of the football, and I think Tennessee is a slightly more talented team than Syracuse is. I think Syracuse does make this a close game for a while, but then Tennessee probably does pull away. Maybe it could be in the start of the second half, or it could be by the fourth quarter, and maybe Tennessee probably wins by a couple of touchdowns, or maybe by like 10 points, somewhere in that particular point range. So I think Tennessee does beat Syracuse here. I think Syracuse is going to get off to an 0-1 start, and then after that they take care of UConn. UConn is not a bad group of 5 team though, so maybe that's kind of a tough one there, but Syracuse definitely is the better team, and I got them improving to 1-1, and then they take care of Colgate on September the 12th. That game is actually on a Friday, so they play Colgate on Friday, so that puts them at 2-1, and then they open up conference play against Clemson on the road on September 20th. I don't think this is going to be a close game at all. Clemson is just way too more experienced, and also playing in Death Valley. That's a very tough way to start out ACC play here for Syracuse. I know Syracuse has given Clemson some trouble in the past, but these two teams did not play last year, and I think Clemson does win this one fairly easily. Again, Clemson just way too explosive on offense, and also way too talented and very well experienced, so I think Clemson wins this game pretty easily, and that drops Syracuse to 2-2. Next game will be at home against Duke on September 27th. Obviously another surprise team from last year in the ACC. The Blue Devils look like they're heading in the right direction with Manny Diaz. I do like this defense a lot here for Duke coming up this year. They're kind of decent, and I think they could be a top 25 team as well. You look at the offense, I mean, it's really going to come down to them being a successful team, but they do have a transfer quarterback coming in from Tulane, and with just that, I think Duke has got plenty more depth on their roster, more than Syracuse does. And yeah, I think Duke probably is not a dark horse, but they definitely could be like a top 25 team. And so with that being said, I think Duke definitely, with their roster experience, I think that it's just a slightly more better roster than Syracuse is. But I wouldn't be surprised if Syracuse did win this game. But I'm going to go with actually the Blue Devils here to pull off the win. I don't think it's an upset just because Syracuse is playing at home, but I'm going to go with the Blue Devils. I do like Duke a lot here this year to be like a top 25 team, so I got Syracuse dropping to Duke there, and that puts them at 2-3. Then they play SMU on the road after that on October the 4th. This is an SMU team. Syracuse obviously did not play them last year during the regular season. SMU, I think, is going to be another good team this year. I don't know if they'll be as talented as Clemson will be. I mean, they obviously lost to Clemson in the conference championship, but this SMU team, I think they're clearly the better team here. Maybe Syracuse makes this a close game for quite a while, but I think SMU definitely takes care of business. They definitely should overall be the better team, so I'm going with the Mustangs. Plus, that game is on the road, so I don't think Syracuse will beat SMU here on the road. So I got Syracuse losing 3 games in a row, and that drops them to 2-4. And then they play Pittsburgh after that here on October 18th. They get actually a bye week before playing this game, which I think it really is a good spot for a bye week after playing 3 really tough opponents that could be like top 25 teams. Pittsburgh, though, is a team that is not going to be easy either. This was actually a really good Pittsburgh team, and they always usually are a consistent team in the ACC. I think Syracuse, though, is actually competitive in this game, and also getting a bye week does kind of help them out here in this one. And I think Syracuse actually comes in a little bit more focused, and I think this is the time where Syracuse finally gets their first conference win, and I think it finally does come here against Pittsburgh. So I think Syracuse does pull off maybe some sort of upset. The Panthers were probably ranked in the top 25, which I don't think they will be, but they do got a decent roster, and I think it's slightly a little bit more better than Syracuse's, but I got to go with Syracuse here to pull off the win. Again, the bye week does help them out, and so I think Syracuse, after playing 3 tough games in a row, they finally get a conference win, and they beat Pittsburgh here at home on October 18th, so that puts Syracuse at 3-4, and it also gives them their first conference win of the season. Then after that, they play Georgia Tech on the road on October 25th. Georgia Tech is a team that I think is going to be like a sneaky good team in the ACC this year. I mean, obviously, Haynes King is back at quarterback, and this is a team that just likes to run the football. And I think Georgia Tech definitely is the better team here. I think it is a close game. I think it's a competitive game between these two teams, but I do like Georgia Tech's roster a little bit more than Syracuse, and I think Georgia Tech also has plenty more depth than Syracuse does. So I think Georgia Tech beats Syracuse here at Georgia Tech here on October 25th. So that drops Syracuse now to 3-5. And then you look at these last 4 games. Syracuse has got to win at least like 3 of these in order to get to a bowl game. But after that, they play on Halloween on Friday night against North Carolina on October 31st. The Tar Heels, of course, getting a lot of hype this year in 2025 with Bill Belichick coming over. I mean, obviously, is he going to live up to the expectations? We've seen some of these NFL coaches really haven't had a lot of success in the history of college football. I think Bill Belichick's a great hire, but again, I just still have a lot of question marks about this North Carolina team. I think they're going to be really good. They got some playmakers on the roster, obviously, but Syracuse is playing at home. This is kind of a big game here. It's also on a weeknight here on Friday on the Halloween night on October 31st. I think this place is going to be loud, and I think that probably does get to North Carolina's head, and I think this is probably one of those upset alert games, and I've kind of been back and forth on this game. I thought about choosing North Carolina, but I'm going to go with Syracuse actually here to pull off a slight upset because, again, we've seen these upsets happen in weeknight games, and I think it probably does happen in this one, and I think Syracuse does beat North Carolina. I don't feel confident with this prediction, but I'm going to go with it anyway. So I think Syracuse gets a big win here against North Carolina. That puts them at 4-5, and then they get their second bye week, or actually not a bye week, but they play Miami next here on the road on November 8th. I don't really expect a close game here for this one. I know Syracuse beat Miami last year, but the Hurricanes, I think, will be even more fired up for this one because they lost to the Syracuse team last year. They get them at home this year, and I just think that's going to motivate the Hurricanes in this one, so I think Miami does take care of Syracuse here. I must say it's probably a couple of touchdowns of a win there for the Hurricanes, so that drops Syracuse to 4-6, and then after that, they get their second bye week before playing Notre Dame on the road on November 22nd. second. Kind of similar to the Clemson game. I don't really expect this one to be all that close. Notre Dame is just way too good on the offensive side of the football. Their running game is definitely a lot better than Syracuse, and I just think their defense is also going to give Syracuse problems as well. So I got the Fighting Irish getting the win there. So that drops Syracuse now to 4-7, which is not going to be able to make it to a bowl game, obviously. But then they close things out with Boston College at home on November 29th. I think Boston College is going to be a solid team, but Syracuse is playing at home, so they do want to close out the season really strong. I think this is kind of a 50-50 game, and I think home field advantage might be the difference here. So I think in a close game, I think Syracuse does close out the season against Boston College with a win, so that puts Syracuse at 5-7 for 2025. So that's my prediction here for the Orange. Again, I can see Syracuse probably going 6-6 or 7-5. You look at the schedule, again, it's just very tough of a schedule this year for Syracuse, and that's kind of the reason why I think Syracuse might take a bit of a step back. Again, I don't think this is a bad roster. The offense, the depth and everything, that's a concern there, and definitely the quarterback, but I could definitely see them beating Duke, and I also can, expect them to probably, win one of those road games. Probably against Georgia Tech might be the best option, but you look at, that Duke game, that might decide, Syracuse's season. If they beat Duke, then they probably make it to a bowl game, but if they don't, then they probably don't make it to a bowl game, and that's how I got them finishing 5-7 in 2025. So do you guys agree or disagree with this prediction for 2025 for Syracuse? And also give me your prediction for this team down in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.